Hey everyone, Brett from BreMiSt Woodworks and Games. Today we're going to build us a box. Well, sort of a box. It's a box like this. Well, not quite like this. This was a demo box that I built for an earlier video I was going to make, but I'm going to demonstrate the techniques for this in this video today. Actually, what we're going to be building is a box for Terraforming Mars, a board game insert. And we're going to be using a little foam core. I'm using some picture frame matting, some glue, sewing pins, razor knife, maybe even a few other surprises. Basically, I just wanted to show the techniques, but I also wanted to show my design process. And you know, for some folks that are interested but just don't know where to get started, maybe this will help. So, on that note, let's go. So to get started, let's talk about some materials. These are basically the tools that I use. We got a green cutting mat, saves your table. Don't cut up your mom's dining room table. We got some sewing pins. These are going to help us assemble the foam core. Razor blade if you want, or my cutting tool of choice is one of these razor knives that have the break off blades. You're going to go through some blades. The foam core is kind of hard on the blades. A little sandpaper for cutting off the sharp edges when you cut them. I've gotten some pretty good paper cuts with this stuff before. A tape measure, of course. Pad of paper. Pencil, obviously. And a set of nippers. Sometimes when we're doing these foam core boxes, when we put the pins in, the sections, the pins will stick through sometimes. So these are just helpful to kind of cut the pins off short if you run into that. But I don't use these very often. That need doesn't come up very often. An X-Acto knife if you like, just another cutting tool. And then there's a few other things that, specialty things that I've done, but basically just use your imagination when it comes to the tools and materials. Of course, you're going to need some foam core. This is paper covered foam, 3/16 of an inch thick. You can find this at Michael's or Hobby Lobby. This particular stuff is called Gator board. This you have to buy special from other suppliers, but this is a little different in that the paper on it is a little thicker. It's almost a very thin particle board. That's how thick the paper is. I get scraps of this stuff from a local place, so this is what I use because it's free. But anyway, and also you're going to need some base material. I use picture frame matting. Michael's has a section where they sell undesirable colors or pieces that have been damaged for less expensive. I think that's like $8 for a big sheet of this stuff, but that works pretty good for the base. The reason I don't use foam core for the base of the boxes, I'll show you on this box. Here's the picture frame matting. I don't use the foam core on the base because we're trying to maximize space in the game boxes. Certain games like Caverna, all those components require every bit of space in the box. So to even the 1/8 of an inch that you save here, it can make a little bit of a difference in the height of the box. Even on games like Terraforming Mars, where the components don't take up the whole volume of the box, I've already pre-ordered the expansion for Terraforming Mars, so when I build this, I'm trying to take into account leaving some extra space for the expansion components. So we'll get into that when we do the Terraforming Mars pieces. I'm going to show you a couple techniques also with cutting this out and how to get the nice clean corners. It's fairly simple, but basically on one of the sides of each section of the box you have to just notch out down to the outer piece of paper. so that the outer paper covers the end of the foam core. You don't have to do that. You can cut this piece of foam core, you can glue it together. It just shows the end of the foam core. I prefer it this way, it just makes a cleaner looking box. The glue, speaking of the glue, I didn't mention the glue. Straight up Elmer's craft glue. Any acrylic based glue would work. You know, I also don't want to sit here and hold the pieces together while it dries, so that's what the pins are for. And so you can see, I hope you can see on the video, I have pins installed here. You don't have to leave the pins in once the glue is dried. This has been drying overnight, but I don't know, I kind of like the shiny little rivets look on the box. But I don't know, you can take them out if you don't like it. Also seen, or I've also used, you can buy some foil tape that can kind of help hold the box together, and it adds an extra shiny bit, you know, to the box. Kind of cool looking. But anyway, that's basically it for now. In the next section, I'll talk about how to design these boxes. Forgot to mention one thing. This is a key piece of equipment here. A metal straight edge. When you're cutting the foam core and you're using your razor knife, you want something to be able to run your razor knife up against to get a nice straight cut. Let's talk about design stuff. A couple of tips. When you're taking measurements of your game box or your components or whatever, never shoot for line-on-line exact fit. Always undersize the box a bit. You want to make sure it fits in the space that you have. A little bit of a gap is better than having to go back and fix the insert later because something is a little too long. Also, with the approach that I mentioned where you have an extra bit of paper here, believe it or not, that does add some length onto this, so maybe factor that in if you take this approach. In particular with this stuff, this is about a 64th of an inch, which doesn't seem like much, makes it a 32nd larger, but then you also got the heads of the pins. I mean, by the time you're all said and done, you could be larger by a 16th of an inch, and that can make or break whether your insert fits. The other tip I have too, the other thing, the other goal, I guess, in designing these is to try and compartmentalize all your components, all the like components, such that no matter what box I like to store my games vertical, some people like to store their games horizontal. No matter what orientation the box is, it's going to contain all the components in their corresponding spaces. So there's tricks to do that. I forget what game it was, but there's some tiny small cubes or something, and I was afraid that any bumping around, these cubes are going to be all over the place. So one of the things I did was I actually designed not quite a lid, because the cubes actually, so if the cubes were in this box here, the cubes were actually, they didn't go all the way to the top of their little space. So I designed a piece of foam core. It actually fit down inside, kept everything in the container, and then the actual game board itself sat right on top of that. So when the box was closed, that rib and that cap, if you will, kept all those little cubes in place. So it doesn't matter what orientation the box was. So now onto the design. Okay, draw yourself a sketch. Just jot down a couple of dimensions. I have it written down here somewhere. Here it is. When I measured it, and again, I undersized by I think a 16th of an inch or so. So I came out with an insert that is 11 and 5/16. The box is square, so it's 11 and 5/16 by 11 and 5/16. Those are your outer working dimensions. The next largest thing in the box is the board. So I measured the board when it was folded up. I need to maintain a thickness and space to fit the board. That happens to be 10 3/8 by 8 3/4. So what's left, the space under the board and the space around the sides are for the components. So in this particular case, in Terraforming Mars, if you've ever seen it, there's the hex tiles. So I'm going to make a rack, a tile rack that goes in here. One thing to mention too: play the game. Play the game 2 or 3 times before you do this. How you play the game can affect how you design this. In Terraforming Mars, these hex tiles, you need to be able to draw them out quickly. Well, not quickly, but efficiently or easily. Pulling them out of the bag is a little fiddly, so I'm going to make this rack such that it's removable. So also this helps with the ease of setup. You can just, when you're setting up the game, you just take it out and set it off to one corner of your gaming space and start playing. Same thing with the cards. I'm going to make I haven't quite decided if I'm just going to make a designated spot for the cards to slide in there or what. I'm a big fan of the really useful brand of plastic container that you can get at Office Max. I think Terraforming Mars is either up to 5 or 6 players. So there's 5 or 6 different, I think it's 6 players. There's 6 different colors of player cubes. And so they have these small plastic containers that I'm actually planning on putting under the board. Also, in this design, I may add an extra bit of foam core along this edge and this edge around here so that the board has something to set down on. That way I can maintain the space under there, and I can keep the board up closer to the lid, actually, that way, to maximize the space under there. Now, I mentioned the expansion. I think the expansion comes with another board, so I may leave that lower in the box and just fill in the space with some bulk foam or something for now until then. So let's see, that's the few thoughts I have. Like I said, start large to small, box size first, then your board. The deck of cards in this is fairly substantial. Make room for those. The tiles, the collection of tiles, so all of the greenery / city tiles, the ocean tiles, and the special tiles, those take up a bit of space. And then the player cubes, make, whatever container, plastic containers you decide to use, or whatever, maybe you want to make little trays like this for the player cubes. Make space for those. Something like this would be pretty cool to just basically, oh, I want to be blue. And so you can take the blue out of the box and hand it to that person, and the next one can get the yellow, and so on and so forth. You don't have to, they don't have to fumble with baggies or anything. You can just pull the container out, pop the lid off, and away you go. Let's start to build this Terraforming Mars box. Insert. From your sketch, you're going to want to generate a cut list. Now you could say, okay, I know I need each of these pieces to be a certain height by whatever the dimensions end up being, and then just sort of cut them as you go. But I like to generate a cut list. Cut list will look like this. So I'm going to end up making some more pieces later, but for now, of the 3/16 thick foam core material, these are the pieces that I need for the main tray, the main insert to go in the box. For the tile rack, these are the pieces that I need, the quantities and pieces that I need, dimensions that I want to build the tile rack out of. So I probably will start here. Unlike your design process where you start large to small, you almost want to start small to large, although it's not quite as important. Build this first, and then when I assemble the main tray, the position of this I may need to adjust depending on how big that tray comes out. It's just error proofing, really. Same thing with the length of this. I may need to adjust that.